Working While Parenting, presented to you by the Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce. I'm Claudia Pasmani, Executive Director, and I'm with John Page, who is our Membership and Marketing Director. And together we are hosting a panel today who is sponsored by Charter Insurance and also supported by Country Bank. So thank you to them, and now to our panel. So thank you all for being here. We have an incredible panel that I would like to introduce. And I'm going to cheat because I have some notes because these women have amazing credentials. Laura LeClair. Laura, raise your hand so people know. There's Laura. Laura has a master's in education. She's been a family school consultant. It's family school consultant for Aurora Family Support with 23 years of Montessori experience as well. She has a ton of support. Laura will tell you a lot more about herself. So welcome, Laura. Janet McKenna Lowry of 9 to Thrive, a company that helps people pursue happiness, which I love, easier. And she's also a radio host. So she's also had 20 years of homeschooling. And I know Laura had 23 years of Montessori experience. And Castile O'Neil is also a longtime Montessori teacher and currently with Web. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here. For answering and fielding questions, but also to offer sound advice and practical skills and practical strategies for parents who are working remotely and students who are working remotely and how to make that synergy work. But firstly, I just want to thank Lisa Eugen is here with us. Lisa, say hi. Lisa is a chamber ambassador, and so she's been representing the chamber for a long time and is the marketing coordinator at Charter Insurance here in Amherst. And Katie Carey is also part of Charter Insurance, who's our sponsor, and she is their sales executive. And she has just wanted to say a few words to get us started. Katie?
Hi, thank you. So cybersecurity risks have increased significantly from working remotely for both businesses and homeowners. For most small businesses, we can add cyber liability coverage to your existing business owner's policy. But if that's not a fit for your company, we can also purchase it as a separate policy. For homeowners insurance, we do have a company that allows you to add cyber liability to your existing home, condo, or renter's insurance. With the increase in online shopping, make sure you have identity theft coverage. In most cases, we can add that to your policy for less than $40 a year. If you're hosting a learning pod, make sure you have enough liability coverage. Call your agent and ask about an umbrella policy. Feel free to give us a call. We have many years of experience to help with both your personal and your business needs.
Terrific, thank you. Yes, cybersecurity has been an enormous issue and one that has come up frequently. So thank you, and thank you for the support. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to our panel, and I'm not sure who wanted to start, but I know we had some questions already that were sent in previously. So I'd like to go around and have each panelist introduce themselves, and they're going to share a little bit more about what they've already been seeing and hearing. And I'll start with, I'm just starting with whoever's at the top, and I'm going to start with Janet.
Sure. So what would you like me to do? Would you like me to address these questions or talk in general?
Introduce yourself first, and then, okay. Yeah, and then I think basically, I think we should talk about what we all been hearing and seeing, and then we'll get into the questions.
Okay, great. Well, my name is Janet McKenna Lowry, and my company is 9 to Thrive, and it is a coaching and consulting company that helps people balance work and life and creativity, so ways to sort of enrich themselves and have a full life and not burn out, honestly, which is why it has to do with the pursuit of happiness. So what I've been hearing from a lot of people is the time component, which actually one of our questions kind of covers, but the idea that they can't possibly devote 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day to keeping a kid, this sort of disciplinary aspect of keeping a kid in front of Zoom while they do their own work. And I agree. Nobody actually does that pretty much who homeschools. I can say that, not completely categorically, but close to. Healthy families that are happy don't tend to do that. Very repressive families do, but really happy families don't. Because nobody likes to spend 7 hours in front of Zoom. And every actor or Olympic athlete you've ever seen homeschooled. And what they did is they did their schooling within about 2 hours to 3 hours a day. And then they did their independent work, which for them is a sport or they're acting, but for your child may be something different. And that is eminently doable. And I know that because I did it. Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I've been hearing about. And a lot of it just has to do with a mindset shift. So it's really not the kids' issue, it's really the parents' issue to shift how we see learning and how we see our own shape of the day and amount of time and what we can apply our attention to.
Thanks, Janet. Laura?
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura LeClair. And as Claudia said, I run a local business called Aurora Family Support. And I'm what I call a family and educational consultant. So I work with families and schools, and I specialize with the very new family and the very young child. So children under 3, infants, toddlers, that's my thing. And I'm also a postpartum doula. And I also work with another local woman. Her name's Felice DiMartino, and we have a coaching business called Your Toddler Coach, which is really Felice's baby, but I help. And we really want to be supportive of families right now, because if you have a very young child at home who's under 3 and you're trying to do a full-time job remotely, that is a huge challenge. And just for a little of my own background, I taught children under 6 for 23 years, and now I train teachers who are also trying to work remotely still. And I also homeschooled my teenager, who is now grown, and did that while I was working full-time. And what I'm hearing right now is just how people are trying to find some balance and wondering what's appropriate for their children. You know, is it okay to have a young child in front of the screen? And I do have to say yes, like if we're looking for balance, like it's all right to have your toddler in front of a Zoom call. That if it's interactive, it's fine. All the research about children and screen time is about passive screen time. And interactive calls like this, like if you're talking to grandma or if you're talking to your child's teacher and your child is sitting in front of the screen, like doing a song circle with other people, that is absolutely okay. And I want people to give themselves permission to do that. I teach a little children's yoga online, and it is definitely a 20 or 30 minute time when parents can take a break and their children will be interacting with me on the screen, even though that's not ideal. And I certainly prefer in-person teaching for children. If you need 30 minutes, find an online yoga class like that your child can watch and do. Because learning is doing. I want people to really realize that. Like if your child is doing an activity, even if it's in front of a screen, it's still learning. And especially young children are learning all the time, because toddlers, especially, just everything they do is a learning experience for them. So I'll start with that.
Wonderful. This is really helpful. Already I'm hearing about time, balance, you know, all this adaptive work needs to happen. So Castile, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Castile O'Neil. I've been a teacher, school administrator, teacher trainer for over 30 years. And I currently help teachers start their own little micro schools from infants through high school. And I'm right now really supporting the teachers and supporting families and supporting families in our schools as they go through this. And I think some of the things I'm hearing are, I'm completely overwhelmed, I'm exhausted, and kind of the sense of no one's ever had to do this before, which isn't really true. Like actually for much more of humanity, this is how people lived. People had family farms, people had family businesses in the same space where their home was. And the family as a little community had to work together to meet all those needs. And so helping people, I think some part of what parents are feeling is I have to do everything. And especially if your children are 4 and up, like actually, if you can think about how can I incorporate my child into the work of our family and help, and that's for your child. If your sense when you're with your child is, oh, I need to be doing work, or I promised my kid I'd spend 20 minutes with them and I'm doing it, but really I'm thinking about my work, and you're not really there with your child is feeling that. They're feeling my parent isn't really here with me. And so, how can you find things that you and your child can do together where it's empowering to your child and you're giving your child the message, you can help take care of our family. We have things we need to do. I was talking to someone I work with who has 10-year-old twins, and she said they have 2 hours of schoolwork a day, and then I have to fill in the rest of the day for them. And I said, no, you don't. They're 10 years old. They're capable of coming up with interesting things to do on their own. It's your work to kind of create interesting options around the house or in your yard, or so they can think about what they want to do, but also thinking about taking away from yourself. Okay, I have to make them lunch. It's like, no, you don't. They could make their own lunch. They could make lunch for the whole family. What if that was part of their day, their work? They got to plan it. They wrote the grocery list. You'd probably have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 2 weeks, and then they'd get tired of them and they'd have to think of something else to make. Maybe they'd open a cookbook. Maybe they would send you things to go buy at the store. Maybe they'd take over the work of creating the family grocery list. And that's very empowering to 10-year-olds. Because for young children, and really all children, work and play, they don't distinguish between those two things. So if you've got work to do around the house, if you need to do laundry, your 4-year-old would love to help you pull warm clothes out of the dryer. So don't feel like I have to entertain my 4-year-old in front of a screen so I can go do my laundry so the family has clothes to wear tomorrow. Like, it's what parts of that can you bring your child into so it's fun for both of you, and you're both doing the work that needs to get done for your family.
Okay, so clearly we've established we have some experts in the room. So thank you. Because, and I love it because you all come from a little bit of a different angle, and covering a lot of age groups, and also a lot of dynamics that happen in family dynamic from, early childhood and up. So that really helps us gauge. I forgot to introduce John Page, who's with us, our marketing membership manager. I don't think I said my name, which is Claudia Pasmani. I'm executive director of the Amherst Area Chamber. So we are welcoming you here to Balancing Parenting. And I really want to thank Country Bank. Country Bank was also a supporting sponsor of our program today. And of course, in Charters with us, who is representing. Thank you both for supporting us. Our longtime chamber members really have carried us through this incredible, challenging time. So I want to get back to parenting, and one of the things we talked about strategies to achieve balance between work and parenting. So maybe just again, I know you've touched on a few, but if there's any strategies that you've shared that you've seen work that were practical, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Anyone want to start? Or
Well,
maybe go ahead, Janet.
Castile brought up some excellent points about including your children in the day and in the sort of the life, actually, of the family. And I didn't mention before, I have a radio show on WMUA from 4:30 to 5:30 every Wednesday. And it's about balancing life and work. It comes out of a podcast I had a couple of years ago. But now for the fall and for the foreseeable future, my guests are all working, homeschooling parents, and I particularly like to reach out to people who have challenges like learning disabled kids or single parents. My most recent guests had 7 kids, each of them different families. I actually have another 7-kid family coming up, and we're single moms for a period of that. So the things that they talk about repeatedly are creating a learning environment, which is a nice phrase for exactly what Castle was talking about, which is just a way to say everything you do counts. Every time you learn how, not only do you put the laundry in, but you actually have some interest in how a washer works, and you look at a YouTube video that shows you what's happening on the inside. That counts. Enlisting your kid as a citizen of the family, a participating full citizen, that counts. And the structure that I've had a lot of success with and a lot of parents talk about in being successful is a family meeting. Sounds corporate, isn't, unless you consider corporate to be the establishment of good relationships, which at its base is leadership. So regular time when you talk to the kids and listen to them, talk about the goals and expectations of this family, find out from them how we're going to satisfy those goals and expectations, and then support them as much as possible in those goals and expectations. When you homeschool as opposed to school at home, and I advocate for that just because I think this is a very difficult situation for parents, you can say to a kid who loves horses, you have to learn some math. And how are we going to do that? And one woman, her daughter designed horse math and studied horse math for 2 years. How fast do horses go? How much do horses weigh? How can you tell the difference between different kinds of horses? Where do horses come from? Why do people have horses? Everything was horse math. So that kid pursued it using the leverage of her own interest, but along this sort of family meeting of, how are we going to get to those goals? And one of those goals is I need to work. How are we going to get my time to work? One of those goals is I need to rest. How can I have a period where I am offline from everything to recharge? So, yeah, family meetings.
Really helpful. Really helpful. Okay, I love it. Laura?
Yeah, I'll add to that family meeting idea that even very young children can be part of a family meeting. Like if you have a 2-year-old, they can participate in a family meeting. It might not be the same kind of participation as an older child, but it works. And if you include the 2-year-old in a family structure like that, they enjoy that. They feel empowered by that. They know that they are included. And just that can make things run more smoothly in your household. And I've sort of, Janet, I was so interested in listening to you. I kind of forgot the initial question. What was how did we start that?
Strategies, I think. But before you go on, not to interrupt you, but when you talked about including toddlers in the family meeting, I actually got chills. It's so important to them.
Yeah, it really is. And I think that the next most important strategy in my mind is having some kind of routine that especially for young children, it's very important. They feel better when they know what's going to happen next. And so having a daily routine or a weekly routine is important to them. And it's going to be very important to the grown-ups to also be able to say, like, this is what's happening next, and not have to do everything on the fly. And I know that depending on what people's work life is like, that might not always be possible, but to have some kind of framework set up, like if you put it on the fridge, like we usually get up around 8 and we all have to eat breakfast, and then we have to have a work time, and it can be pretty fluid. I often make the distinction between a routine and a schedule. Schedules are really hard because they're strict and they have times, like from 9:05 to 9:20, we're going to do this. That doesn't work as well as just having a routine. Like this comes after this and then this comes next, but the timing can be flexible. So that's a strong suggestion that I make to everyone, to sit down together as a family and figure that out. And I don't think I can wait any longer to bring up the idea of maybe you're doing this by yourself. Janet mentioned single parents. I'm a single parent. I always have been. And it's tricky. And you have to give yourself some grace, and you have to ask for help is my next biggest suggestion. Like if you're doing this by yourself, or maybe you have a 2-parent family, but one of those grown-ups absolutely has to be in front of their computer from 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way that it is. So you're functionally doing this by yourself. I think in this day and age, people find it very hard to ask for help, but it's really important to leap over that hurdle and find someone else. Whether that's a family member or a friend, or you find a pod, that I know a lot of people are creating these little learning pods. We did have a question about what's the best way to get a full schedule in-person education for children if your district isn't offering in-person education right now. And so pods are becoming an alternative to that, and reaching out and finding some small group of people that you feel safe working with and intermingling with at this time during the pandemic is a doable thing. I know there are groups online. I could put them in the chat in a little bit. There's a Google group about Western Mass pod formation. There's a Facebook group where people are interacting and finding people who live nearby and who have kids about the same age, and people are managing things in that way. I'll post those links in the chat in a minute.
Perfect.
But
Perfect.
So that routine and asking for help.
Yeah, those are big ones. Castle?
Yeah, I think a strategy for parents is to understand that how they're spending time with their children, if their children are now at home full time, is different from how they were spending time with their children when you either had a single parent or 2 parents who were both working a long day and their children were in some kind of care during the day or at school, you know. And so typically what I've seen is, like, in that situation, you had, like, let's say you're a 2 working parent family, you know, you pick up your kids from their childcare situation at 5:30, you go home, you have this little window of time in the evening between getting home and bedtime, and you are just fully in for your children during that time, because that's your little window of time to see them every day, and maybe a little window of time in the morning before school. That is not how it is now. You can't keep up that pace when you're with your children 24 hours a day. I mean, there's no way to be like in that super fully present way 24 hours a day. And so I think, like, to come back and think, as Janet was referring to, what are the times of day I'm going to have to myself to do my work, or just literally to have 20 minutes by myself to recharge and reset, so that I can be the best possible parent for my child. If you're not taking care of yourself during this time, and you find yourself feeling completely burned out, the best thing you can do for your child is find a way to be able to recharge, get some time to yourself. So I do think, like, finding and creating your own pods, little communities, somebody else you trust, you make some agreements about how you're going to live your lives in terms of safety with COVID. And so that you can just have breaks from each other. Even my husband and I are talking about our anniversary gift to each other is one of us is going to go away for a weekend. So we can have a break from each other, though we love each other dearly. Everybody needs some space. So, you know, I think understanding your children also need some space, you know, and you may have set up with them this almost like self-circulating between the 2 of you situation where you feel like you have to be together 24 hours a day, when it is actually better for everybody for you to have some time away from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that too with parents, like, is getting, if you were already having some challenges around setting limits with your child, like pre-COVID, And especially if you're in this place of feeling sorry for your child, because they're not seeing their friends very much. You know, it's this just, we all are feeling a lot of stress around COVID, but it is actually, your child is going to feel safer. And this really is connected to the idea that Laura was talking about of routines. If they understand what the expectations are, if everybody in the family during that family meeting comes to some agreements about, you know, for us to have enough money to be able to do the things we want to do as a family, that means the adults have times where they have to be doing their work. They have to be doing their work uninterrupted. And your work for the family during that time is to not interrupt. Your work is, you know, unless the house is burning down, there's blood, but otherwise your work is to whatever, read a book, do your own schoolwork, run outside and play if you're old enough to do that without an adult outside. You know, but for the child to not see that as my parent is shoving me off because they don't want me, but to understand my mom has this important work she has to do, and my important work is to entertain myself, you know, is to keep busy and not interrupt. You know, and as a parent, you set that expectation up. I have a meeting, it's 60 minutes. I'm setting the timer. When the timer goes off, you can come back into my office and we'll read a book together, or we'll have a snack together. Or so I mean, it's back into that routine of the day. There's a work time when the adults work, the children work, play, you know, then we have times of coming together, and then we have times of separating back out. And so when children understand that rhythm, and like Laura was saying, can predict it, and that is important whether you're 2 or 12 or 16, then everybody understands with clarity how we're going to work together and be together as a family while we're all together.
Right. Oh gosh, there's so much to unpack here. Wonderful. So one of the things we did when we started this program was we asked folks to submit questions. One of the questions, and again, as a chamber, certainly we're really concerned about our businesses, how productive they can be, you know, during and being adaptive as well. And so one of the registrants asked, my productivity and focus are not as sharp as prior to COVID. How do I demonstrate my value to my employer during this time? Because I think that distraction of parenting, you know, has changed dramatically. So what advice can you give, or how do you help parents maintain that?
This is a really great question, especially given all that's come before, because we've actually in many ways answered it without directly answering it. There's a couple of things that are interesting in the question itself, which is that productivity and focus are not as sharp, or that children are a distraction. And that's not necessarily true. That's a mindset. If you do make a routine, if you do have check-ins with your kids, then it's not distractions. It's what happens during the day. Your teammates may be distractions at work, and you have to be able to ask them, can you save up all your questions for 3 o'clock? Because that's when I am not really focused, and I go get coffee, and that would be a great time to check in with me. A lot of it is management skills, and it's all transferable. What you learn in this experience will make you a much better manager, because you'll be a better team player. Because this is a team. This is all kind of getting along, going along, getting your goals done. And as far as productivity and focus, that is where you look at you really actually have to be internal. It's a mindset change. You have to take care of your child care differently than we did before. And that's the thing all homeschoolers have to deal with young children, is separate in my mind childcare versus school. And we've become very used to it being the same thing. And I think COVID has displayed a lot of the cracks in that system. And once you've separated that out, you look at how you work best. Is your most productive focus time in the morning, or is it in the afternoon, or is it in the evening? Because in a lot of cases, you can really switch around what you do. Some jobs no, some jobs yes. But then the piece is to really buckle down with your kids and say, this is where I need to be working and have minimal, no interruptions. And this, and how will we get to that? Having done that, you're not only able to display time management, cognitive management, but for goodness sake, write that up for your boss. Write up how you have really examined yourself and your energy in the day and the tasks at hand, and reworked the flow of the day so that that can be attended to. So, and it's not always going to be perfect, and you're going to have to forgive yourself for that. But in fact, mothers, caretakers, but it's usually mothers, have been shown to have all these neural connections that expand when they have kids, because your productivity and focus are huge. It's just a question of managing that. And then taking, I don't know, a half hour every week and writing down what you've done and talking to your own boss about it. Because a good boss is someone who does the same thing that you're doing, which is managing a learning environment and supporting you so that you can get those agreed upon goals done. That's what a good boss does. If it's more a micromanagement situation, that's an indication of an insecure and perhaps not very skilled boss, in which case you have to do a certain amount of managing up and advocating for yourself and saying, I do the work that has agreed upon, and here's how I do it. Here's the support I need.
That's incredibly helpful. Laura?
Yeah, I'll follow that up with, so that making that list of things that have been accomplished, that's actually something I do as part of my self-care. I don't do that for my supervisor. I do it for me. Like, instead of always having this to-do list that's endless, I make lists of like, I got all this stuff done today. And there's 7 things on this list, and wow, like I was not unproductive. And that is part of my self-care. It's actually really life-changing since I started doing that. And I'll also just speak to this topic as like, I have been a remote worker for 4 years now, well pre-pandemic. And it's definitely a huge lifestyle shift to be essentially self-scheduled. I have very little time when I like have to be in front of my computer, but except that like I have X number of hours a week that I have to get done, but it could be whenever. So I've had to do a lot of, routine building and making structure in my day, because I don't have a brick and mortar job to go to somewhere. And the 2 ways I help that happen in my own life are, I use Google Calendar religiously, and I have blocks of time on my calendar for every work task that I have to do. And the nice thing about Google Calendar is that I can take one of my tasks and drag it around to another place if things have to change. But I have every hour accounted for on there for everything that I know I have to accomplish. And I also do the same thing for my household chores. And that might look a little different if I had younger children. My grown son does live with me. We're a little household of 2. And we have stuff on the calendar. Like, I know I'm going to get this done. He's going to take the trash out at 7 a.m. on Thursdays. Like, that's a thing on the calendar. So we don't forget things. And then the other thing that I do, which may have just slipped out of my brain, you know how that happens. I had 2 things to say, but now that I talked about the calendar, I can't remember the second. So why don't you get back to me and I'll think of it in a minute.
Absolutely. Castle?
I think with this question, what comes to mind is I was in a conference this summer with someone who's a teacher in Senegal, and he was saying that in his country, that the way people greet each other is they say, "How are the children?" And because if the children are good, the community is good. And I would love to see us in our work world take on more of that attitude of like, the work of taking care of the children is the work of all of us. And so for people, and I do too. I work from home. I like Laura, I worked from home beforehand. I have people I sort of manage. And, you know, I think understanding that, you know, no one asked for this situation. Parents are fine. I think for employers to understand if they aren't themselves dealing with this within their own family. If you're like me and your kids are grown up, just understanding your employees, the stress of wanting to be the best they can be at their work and wanting to be the best parent they can be, and how hard it is to find that space. And I think just a slight word from managers, from employers saying, I understand this situation. I understand the challenge. Like, how can we support you? How can we work together? Like, you know, if you're a night owl and there's work you can do until midnight and that works for you, like being okay with that. Like, so I think flexibility, and I think for employees to be, you know, depending on the nature of your work and your relationship with the people you work with, but just to be open and vulnerable about the challenges you're going through and seeing if you can work together to find solutions that work for everybody. You know, that it isn't all on the parent. In my mind, I don't think it's all on the parents to solve this. Like, I think this is something we should all be doing, working together to help ourselves as a greater community get through this all together. So I think that's my advice to, you know, for everybody to have some grace and compassion and just reality. Just understand the reality of this situation for everybody involved. And, you know, bosses are working to, I understand, I'm helping 30 small schools try to stay open through this. Like, everybody has their own level of challenge in
right
getting through this.
Just, if anyone on the call has a question you'd like to ask, you can certainly unmute. And Lisa, I know you have someone at home, so I didn't know if you had any questions for the panel, but certainly if you know, or any inquiries, because I know there was another question that was posed, and I know that Laura had touched upon it a little bit, but it was about what is the best way to get full schedule in-person education for my children in a district that does not offer that. So, and again, that's about setting a bar really high or not, I don't know. So I haven't homeschooled, but you're all reminding me that in normal times, you know, not with COVID, you know, having 2 kids, a full-time job, I don't even remember how I managed it all, you know, and got through it all. So, and then to put, you know, the single parent model in that mix, you know, that was not my model. So that changes that completely and how that all came together. So, you know, I just am curious what this question might mean to you when you talk to folks. Janet, you want to start?
Well, it's funny because I mean, they're kind of asking for a fairy godmother, right? They're asking to go back to what it was before, which was comfortable and there was no pandemic. I mean, in some ways that's, yeah.
We all want that.
Yeah, we wish it wasn't infectious. We wish there wasn't, you know, people who are getting sick and staying sick, people who are dying. I mean, yeah. It's such a funny question because it's like, well, you know, yeah, if we had a magic wand, that would happen. And I think that's that mindset shift. I think it's that piece where you have to start saying, there's 2 Zen concepts that come to mind. One is mu, which is, this is the wrong question. That's that question, how can we be back where we were and please have nothing change, can't be the question anymore. But the other one is this concept of, now this is right. It's this acceptance of what we literally cannot change. We can't change a school district. We can't make them do what we wished was there. We can't make it different. So then if you start with well, now this is right. how then do you change how you look at things? How then do you make sure that your kids are cared for, and there's the childcare piece, for a chunk of the day so that you can do what you need to do, whether that's a pod or an exchange or a family member or hiring someone, all that kind of support Laura was talking about, that single parents get very, very good at figuring out so it really is pulling apart that childcare piece of school from the learning piece of school. And they do not have to go together. As I think it was at Castle where you pointing out that, I mean, up until 150 years ago, they didn't go together. Childcare was one thing and school was something else you did. So how can you get it? I mean, good luck. You'll have to find some, either a private school willing to take your kid or some other district and see whether they're willing to do it. That's going to take a lot of attention and cognition and work to do. So don't think that that's a freebie between now and whenever you get back to what you thought you had. So, and it also doesn't necessarily leave you a lot of room for growth and for changing how you see your kids, how you see your family, how you see going forward. This thing may end. This thing may not end. There may be another one. So that piece, it almost, the question's got a rigidity to it that is more like a self-comfort. Like, that may be impossible. How will you self-comfort and then change how you see your family and how you see your routines and how you see progressing from here? And it is sad, and it is a point of grieving, and it is a perceived loss. But as with all perceived losses, other things come, other things open up, other ways that we're not used to. We're really used to this: drop the kids off at school and go work. That's only, a lot of people don't live like that. A lot of people in the world don't live like that. Homeschoolers don't live like that. And the kids are okay. It's, just because we're used to it doesn't mean it's the best way. So I think there's that sort of scary opening that the question sort of references a little bit.
That's really helpful. Does anyone else want to address that? Laura?
Yeah, so my main job remotely is working with teacher interns, and I can see and my teacher interns are all over the world, but they are all working full-time in schools. So we know that some children are getting to go to school. So I can empathize with folks who are seeing that happen, but they don't have that option, and that being really challenging to witness. And so there are schools out there that are taking children, and there's probably a lot of like, if it's not your typical school or your free public school, I can see there are lots of barriers to finding that for your own children. And I want to acknowledge that these things are changing all the time. So I live in Amherst, and the Amherst school schedule has been changed multiple times in the past few weeks because of the rise of cases, and people have had to scramble. And I'll echo what Janet's getting at here, that like, we have to go with the flow kind of and figure out something else, whatever it may be. And I think it's very hard on people mentally to keep sitting with like, but how do we get that thing we used to have? So like, if there was ever a time for getting out of our boxes, it's now, and that's hard. And I think it's helpful to brainstorm with people and find someone who you can vent to and let all that grief out, and then try to find other solutions. Like, I'm pretty sure all of my friends who have children over this course of the late summer were like, what are we going to do? There's got to be a million different choices, and then you have to narrow down to the choices you like, or maybe you don't really like any of them, but we just have to take one. There are like 1 day a week outdoor programs that opened. There are week-long outdoor programs that opened. And Claudia, can I just like throw out names of businesses like people who are doing things like maybe
yes, please provide resources. I mean, there's so many.
Well, you know, and we can maybe list these later. Like,
Yep.
and I'm sure I only know some of them, but Free Programs is an outdoor education program in the Valley that is doing new sort of homeschooling, outdoor ed.
I'm sorry, you blipped. What was it called?
Wolf Tree Program.
Oh, Wolf Tree. Okay.
And then Morse Hill Outdoor Center in Shutesbury opened their own outdoor school. That like, so programs that weren't doing like full day childcare looking things are now doing things. And then I have to mention North Star Center for Teens, which is in Sunderland. My son went there for 4 years. I have a friend whose daughter just started there because it was like the only option that seemed tenable for their family this year, even though that wasn't their plan originally. I think North Star is a very affordable option for like as an alternative to a private school.
That's helpful. Yep.
And I do want to just make the bold statement that if you have a child who's been in public school and you're now dealing with a remote learning situation through that public school, and I am so sure that that public school is doing the best they can and offering some amazing stuff, you don't have to continue to do that. That remote schooling and homeschooling are totally different things. And if you think it might be a fit for your family, trying to leave the public school system and moving to homeschooling could be a really, really helpful thing right now. That it's, you know, and I wasn't dealing with a pandemic, but when my son was in 8th grade, we hit a wall with our public school life. And he looked at me one day and said, "Mom, I can't go back there." And I had to listen to him, and I just jumped. I jumped off that cliff pretty quickly, not a lot of prep, and it worked. We figured it out. You know, he was 13 and could help me figure that out a little more than some younger children did. But again, you know, children can have a say in their own lives, and that can be really helpful to their family to get their input and see what they can do and see what they're willing to do. And like Janet mentioned earlier, homeschooling without that like whole remote schooling requirement of what the public schools are doing right now doesn't have to look like, you know, 8 hours a day of school.
Yeah.
And children can be amazingly capable and independent while you do other things.
Right.
And I just want to tell people like that, like, even if you think that sounds impossible, it could really change your life. Like to just be like, you know what, it's like taking a gap year, except your child is 7. Just like, don't tell the public school you're out for a year. See what happens in a year. Or just tell yourself you're going to do it for 6 months and see how it goes. And it's a really simple process of telling the public school in a letter, like, we're going to disenroll, we're going to homeschool. You have to write I know in Amherst, every district is a little different, but you know, in Amherst Pelham School District, you have to just write a little plan, like, this is what we're going to do. And then at the end of the year, you have to write another letter saying, we did this things.
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate what you said about loss. Like first of all, we have to acknowledge there's a grief, like we're losing something. But as Janet said, and you both referred to as, there's a mindset shift, right? Like being open to something new and different. And this is either this new and different as is, or looking at something completely new, as Laura suggests, which is, you know, a totally different option. And then the outdoor options. There are so many, I keep seeing new options arise. So I'm thrilled that you shared some of those. But Castile, did you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I mean, One is if you just really feel strongly you want your child in a school. There are private schools, many in Western Mass. And if you have always felt like that was not a financial possibility for you, many of them have significant scholarships. So don't think the only option is to do full pay of tuition. And even some schools, I've worked in the independent school world for many years, and I mean, schools are sometimes willing to barter with families, that when I started my school in Cambridge, Mass, the dad of two of the children in my class was a contractor, and he did the rebuild of our space. That's how he paid for his tuition the first year. So, there are, most independent schools are kind of independent thinking, and they might be willing to work with you. Especially if they have a sense that you're going to stay long-term. And then also I can say many independent schools are actively working to be more racially and socioeconomically diverse. And so you might be able to help them do that. The other thing I would say is, so I homeschooled my daughter in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade while I was teaching in a school all day that she was not in. And so we did that in a couple of ways. She would sometimes come with me, and she would bring her own work to do and own things to do. And I was working with 3 to 6-year-olds in a Montessori class. She would come and run around outside and be the big sister to them on the playground. We were inside of a church. She would go and use the church's piano to do her piano practice. But I also really made use of the community of other people around me who were homeschooling. That's really what got me through it. And right now that's harder to do. Or there were day classes during the day you could drop homeschoolers off at. And right now that, again, is harder to do. But I think finding other people, who are interested in doing a similar kind of thing and just working it out among you of who's going to do what. And so like on Friday afternoons, I had a crew of kids at my house and we did science all Friday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
I could drop my daughter off at somebody else's house. I also know some of these learning pods. Somebody I work with is part of 5 families, and each family is taking one, and this is a group of 5 children between 3 and 6, and they're each taking turns to take a day, to watch the children. So the parents have to take a day off from work, and they've worked that out with their employers. But the other 4 days, their children are together. And, I think the other thing for parents to think about in a situation like that is, one thing this parent said to me is, she said, it's so amazing to me to be able to watch who my child is and a community of other children who are learning. And I'm getting to watch my daughter learn to read, which I would never have gotten to do, like, if she was just in school all day learning to read there. So to see that there are positives to this, and opportunities we wouldn't have had before. So, yeah.
Getting back to that mindset, the shift, right?
Well, yeah, and something that Casa touched on, but Laura definitely said is those hours in school. It's really important to understand that if your child had some difficulty, like a medical difficulty, and actually this happened to a very close friend of mine when she was in high school. She had to have the scoliosis in her back surgically corrected, and she was in traction for 5 months.
Wow.
The school department, the district, sends a tutor to your house. That tutor is at your house for 2 hours. That is the official Massachusetts on task time estimate of what a child is doing in the school day, because you're with 30 other kids. It takes time to explain the instructions to 30 other kids. It takes time to adjust. It takes time to line up. It takes time to transition. All these things take a lot of time. So people assume that the 6 hours is like focused learning, and it's not, because in fact, as like meat-based primates, that's incredibly hard to sustain for any of us. We don't like it. We don't take, typically, when we're going to do professional training, we don't go, yeah, give me 6 hours for the next 180 days. So in fact, it's not really what's happening. There's some social aspects, but there's all these other things that go on during the school day. Another thing that occurred to me, actually, a couple of my guests have talked about this, and my own kids did this, which is if your kid is someone told me this very early, if your kid is between, 0 and 11, 10, 11 really, you're the manager. You manage their day, you manage their learning, you manage their learning environment with their assistance. From there on, though, you transition into a consultant. And very, very, very many high school aged homeschoolers go to community college. And the community college tests the kids not to reject them, but to see where they need to be. And most high schoolers, they're certainly capable of the work. And we know that because community college's role is to even out the disparities in our educational system, something we don't like to look at, but absolutely exists. Your kid that graduates from Amherst is going to have a very different high school education than someone who got educated in the worst high school in Mississippi. And they both graduated, and they're both now funneling into some kind of higher education, and they have to make up those differences somehow. There is no reason you can't avail yourself of that. So that's number one. The mindset shift is that if that kid from Mississippi transferred to Amherst, teachers would have to deal with that. They don't just not take the kid. So don't worry about having your kid do more free-form work or go into learning centers like Laura was talking about, and then go back into school. My kids homeschooled and then went into school seamlessly because you have military kids who move 18 times in 18 years. These things are part of how the system works, and to stop worrying about that. And then the other thing to remember is that this idea of remote schooling is very much an experiment. We've never done this like this. We've never public school, remote schooled kids and expected that system to somehow yank itself around a screen. We have, however, a very solid track record of homeschooling kids. And it, as Laura pointed out, it's critically different than remote schooling. People call it that because they're in their home. It is. Homeschooling is not. Homeschooling is enlisting the kid as an active participant in their own education and then letting that kid direct some of the ways that they go with those agreed upon goals. So that's a lot of sort of the deep mindset shift. It's scary. I'll tell you something, it's going to be one of the best things you ever did, but it's scary to step into it thinking, but there's only one way to learn. And that's 8:30 to 3:30, 8:30 to 2:30 back in school. It's not. Right. And as Castile pointed out, some of these places are willing to do various kinds of flexible arrangements with you as well. You just have to ask what's possible.
Right.
Yeah, so that ask is so important. And it just occurred to me, like, your children ask for everything that they might want. They don't hold back, right? They ask for all sorts of things, and you probably often have to say no. But like, if we could get into that as parents and ask for what we want and see what the answer is, even the public school, like, I mean, I've heard dozens of stories in the last few weeks of parents just telling their public school, like, we're actually not going to do that part of this remote learning. We're going to skip that part. Okay. And the answer has always been yes. That just, okay, do what you need to do. Like, but if you don't ask, the answer is no.
Yeah, I don't think parents realize how much power they have within the public school. If public schools get paid by the seat, and there was an argument at one point with pods. People say, well, I'm helping the public schools by taking my child out and putting them in a pod. And it's like, actually now the public school is not getting the rate for your child. So, the public schools are willing to work with you to keep your child officially on the roster at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And they also, I mean, I think the next level of people, parents are very stressed out. I can also tell you how stressed out schools and teachers are. Like their goal would be to work with you because you both want the same thing. You want what's best for the children. And it is deeply frustrating. And in the same way that parents are grieving that they don't have what they had, so are schools and so are teachers. Like in my organization, we have held grief sessions for teachers. And they miss their kids. Like that's what they talk about. Like, I want to get back to being with my kids. This is what I love. This is why I accept all the hard parts of being a teacher, is so I can spend my day with children, because that's what's important to me. So understanding that's where teachers are also coming from, and they are as frustrated as you are.
Mm-hmm.
The challenges of remote learning. They are working so hard to try to make this work, to do the research. There's so much sharing between teachers of this is what worked for me. And, all the social media for teachers is sharing plans, sharing, how can we try to make this work for families, that need to do this. So I think like understanding this is frustrating and hard for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that also if the option that you have chosen is to work within your school system, to also like not be afraid to ask your child's teacher, like recognize a lot of people are asking them for a lot right now, but if something's really not working for your child and you have an idea of something that is, don't be afraid to reach out to the teacher and ask them, about that. Because teachers want the same thing you do. They want the best experience for your child. So just don't see this as a partnership rather than someone who's trying to make your life hard, because they are also working within a set of requirements. I think if it was just teachers and not administrators and the bureaucracy of the public school, they would be choosing to do this in a very different way, because they know it doesn't make sense for a 6-year-old to sit in front of a screen five days a week, So
no, it's a really important perspective. Yeah, important perspective, because I know we talked a little bit about this when we talked about the panel, and I had mentioned that, we talked about this when asking folks to be really patient with our businesses, because everyone's going through this adaptation, right? And so if we can all work together, have that patience, it builds our resilience, but also I think our connectivity grows, I feel like we teased a lot out, and I feel like maybe we're ready to maybe do a final round of maybe your final thoughts and what parting thoughts you'd like to leave with our working parents, or that we haven't covered today, or just any parting words of wisdom. I feel like you gave us a lot of real skills and thoughtful places and ideas for parents to go. So I really appreciate that. So if you want to just go around and give your final thoughts. Janet, we'll start with you.
Well, I have a little star on this because this is the Amherst Chamber of Commerce. And so we're talking to a lot of people who are small business owners, entrepreneurs, people who are very involved in their own business. And I have to tell you, one of the most brilliant, air quotes, curriculum that you can do is have a kid who is interested in business and how money works, because every single subject, and I do not care if that child is in kindergarten or if that child is a senior, every single thing you want them to learn in school can be done through a lens of a business. And there's a beautiful little children's book called the College Fund Wreath Factory, or Wreath Company. And it's about 4 siblings who one Christmas decided to make wreaths and sell them. So they have to track the money coming in, they have to track the money going out, they have to learn what ratios are, they have to learn what billing is, they have to learn, once they start hiring people, they have to learn how to manage those relationships, they have to write a business plan. The parents did take them through some of the history of how businesses have been set up over time, what's successful and what's not. Look at other countries. The oldest business is, I think, from, I want to say early 1600s. It's still going. It's in Japan. You can use that as this piece. You can also include your kids in your business. My kids paid the bills. They were in charge of bills for like 3 months apiece when they were in middle school, so that they really understood what happens when you leave that light on all night or you crank the heat up to 85. So you can really, they are so much more than what you sort of see, the slivers. We've talked a bit about that, the sliver that you see of your kids. They're so much more competent. And a kid that has real meaning built into their lives, and as with all of us, when we ourselves feel like we can build meaning into our jobs and our work, that is the same when you're a kid. If you feel like you really have meaning, you're a much more willing participant. You're a much less discouraged person. You find this this reward in and of itself, and you're much more self-motivated. And so, I mean, just have it out there that a kid business is a phenomenal thing for a kid to be interested in doing.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Janet. Laura?
Yeah, so the Montessori method of education for children in the like middle and teen years is to run a business. That's what she planned and thought was best, you know, to have them learn all aspects of things. And she also, Dr. Montessori also explained that children should be completely interwoven into our adult lives somehow, because that's how they learn to be an adult over time. They watch us, they do things with us. So I'll just reiterate that if you can weave your child into your life, which probably takes a big reframing at this moment in time, like that I hope that is helpful for folks. And for people with young children, like 6 and under, I want to give everyone permission to not worry about academics.
That's helpful.
Again, as I said, children are learning no matter what they are doing, if they are doing anything, and the reading will come and the math will come. And if they, like, there's no falling behind when you're that young. Like it just, and research shows that, like, people who like know how to read when they're 3, other people catch up to them eventually, and children who read later, it's fine. It's this, and what Janet said, the school is ready for that. Like when we do all get back to school, regular school again someday, the school and the teachers will be prepared to help your child wherever they're at. And then the only other thing I want to add is I do want to give a little plug. I helped write a book back in March when the pandemic first hit. It's an ebook, and it's called The Montessori Parent Coronavirus Survival Guide. I had much help. I think we had 13 authors altogether, but it's sort of a synthesis of strategies for what can you do if you have to be home with your children all day and try to work. It's on Amazon. I can post the link in the chat.
Perfect.
It's anywhere from free to $4.99. I don't make any money off of this. It's something that we all put together to just be supportive of the community, and I hope that it's helpful. And even if you're not a Montessori person, it's still like just some really basic strategies, ideas, free, fun activities that you probably already have everything at home in order to do. So I'll put the link in the chat, and I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Laura. That's fantastic. Castle?
I think the biggest thing is for all of us, like employers, employees, schools, parents, children, adults, to hold each other with grace as we all go through this together and support each other. But supporting each other with grace sometimes also includes holding each other accountable. And I think for parents to really understand that, like, what research supports about children is children can't learn if they don't feel safe. Like, that's the bottom line. Like, that first part of your brain, that reptilian part, has to feel safe. And, you know, things that can make even a child who, has a lovely, predictable, middle-class life, but if they don't know what's happening at any time of the day, their day feels very chaotic, they don't feel safe. They can't settle in. They can't sit in front of a screen or any other way of really learning. And so like understanding that importance of routines, but that importance of setting expectations and then holding your child to them. That means your child may have a screaming temper tantrum when you close the door and say, I have to work for 60 minutes and then I'll be with you. Let them have the tantrum. They will understand that you mean what you say. And the next day, when you have your 60 minutes of work time, there won't be a tantrum because everybody understands the expectation. So that does not mean you're a bad parent if you are setting clear expectations for your child and holding them to it. If you haven't done that in the past and that's new, it will get worse before it gets better. But when it gets better, it will be so much better for everyone. And for the children, I know what my parents expect of me. I know what happens when I step over those expectations. We're all on the same page. It just makes life safer, calmer, happier, more predictable. And if you need support with that, there are lots of programs out there. Positive discipline, conscious discipline. There are lots of programs out there that have webinars for families. It can be aimed, like a lot of it is developmentally learning about your child. Like I asked my 4-year-old to do this and they didn't do it. Was that because I asked them something they're not capable of? Or is that because they just don't feel like they want to do it and they're testing me? And so in these programs, you can learn these are the developmental things a 4-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 18-year-old are capable of. And when you understand where your child is developmentally, that helps you to know, yes, this is a perfectly reasonable thing for me to expect of my child. And so I think just if we're going to be spending, as teachers do, like all day and all night and all weekend, with your children, really dig in and understand developmentally what's important to a 5-year-old. How do 5-year-olds want to learn? What do they care about? What are things 5-year-olds typically don't like to do? And so that you can just keep that in mind as you're living with a 5-year-old. So there's lots of information. Just Google developmental characteristics of 5-year-olds and
developmental characteristics. I love it. No, this is all really helpful. And I think that I want to thank all 3 of you. I wish I had met you when I had my kids at a much younger age. I think I would have felt a lot better about things because we do all sit in this, thing that we're given, and then we kind of stay within that paradigm. And it's really tough to shift, so this is really helpful to help our parents shift with the shifting environment right now. So, and I think anything I've heard today is, that we're all flexible and have the grace, but also self-care. And self-care means maybe Googling, and it means, setting schedules. It means, what did I do today versus to do? I loved that, Laura. Like not just setting all that to-do list, but like just really identifying what did I do and get accomplished today. So, I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank Charter for being with us and for Country Bank to support us. And I look forward to sharing this video with everyone and our business community, because I think this is invaluable support for all of those working in businesses through our chamber and beyond. And I encourage us all to share it. And as you 3 are an invaluable resource. So we'll also post your websites as well.
Thank you.
With it. So thank you so much for being here today.